Ice is able to freeze time. Maybe not literally, but in some corners of the planet it serves as a natural preservative. Until now, people in the far north keep finding artifacts of the past, trapped in ice thousands of years ago and perfectly preserved. For example, a mammoth. But north is the natural habitat for the mammoth. And how about finding some animals that got frozen in ice despite all logic? We've gathered the most shocking finds for you. 9 animals found frozen in ice. The global climate change we're experiencing in the last few years has different manifestations other than the global warming. For example, many tropical regions of the planet have to deal with freezing temperatures, and there we have animals that have never seen snow or ice before. For example, this may happen to the water inhabitants. Their mobility decreases due to the cold, and they fall into hibernation, and they simply freeze. How do you like this hippopotamus? Creepy, isn't it? The poor thing was taken over by hypothermia or overcooling. It means that the body temperature is too low and the metabolism doesn't work normally. First, blood vessels react to overcooling. They get narrower close to the surface of the body, so that more blood is kept within the important inner organs. But the hippopotamus is lucky. It's got subcutaneous fat which slows this process several times and helps produce the necessary heat. But even if such thick-skinned hippopotamus is continuously attacked with extreme cold, it will eventually begin to succumb. The animal will start trembling. This helps the body produce the heat needed for survival. But then, as a result of a long time exposure to extremely low temperatures, the skin of the hippopotamus will get covered in ice and freezing will occur. The ice crystals will damage the cell membranes, and the cells will dehydrate and die, and the cold will continue to spread into the poor hippo's body until it eventually turns into ice. But what if we tell you that some tropical animals can actually survive this? What's more, it's an animal you would less expect to survive an icy prison: a cold-blooded alligator. Just imagine, a reptile which is not capable of surviving winter appears to be frozen in ice. But when it thaws, the heart of the alligator starts beating again and it comes back to life. And this is not just a single case, but the way these animals cope with winter. For example, the alligators in the park of Charlotte, North Carolina. Most times of the year it makes a great home for the large reptiles, but some winters happen to be rather cold. An alligator cannot hunt under low temperatures. It becomes too slow. Because cold-blooded animals are not able to maintain their body temperature, they rely on a warm environment. So the local alligators found a way out. They submerge in water and leave only their noses above it to be able to breathe. The ice quickly cools their bodies, their hearts almost stop, the metabolism hits its lowest levels. But when the frosty days pass, the alligator frees itself from the ice, gets warm in the sun, and lives on. Of course, this know-how for surviving the cold can only work for a short period of time because an alligator, unlike a grizzly bear, doesn't have a layer of fat to provide a longer hibernation. But the very fact that the cold-blooded reptile can survive real freezing is just amazing, isn't it? Only cold-blooded animals are able to perform such tricks with hibernation in ice, but sometimes warm-blooded ones can do similar things too. In 2015, a Chilean snowboarder, Rafael Peace, decided to celebrate his birthday in the mountains on his snowboard. Little did he know of the surprise the mountains had prepared for him. While descending, he noticed a single brown spot on the white background. He thought it was a rock sticking from the snow, but suddenly, the rock slightly moved. Rafael rode closer, and it turned out to be a horse. It was in a trap, but not an ice one. The snow had almost covered the animal, not letting it move. Rafael was very surprised to reveal that the horse was still alive. It must have been trapped just recently. It took several hours for the man and his friend to free the horse from its captivity, and eventually they returned it to the owner in the nearby village. The animal managed to survive thanks to its thick, warm fur and the fact that the snow hadn't covered it completely. How about you? What amazing adventures did you have on your birthdays? Of course, this horse survived because it was covered with snow, not ice. The ice would have cooled its body much faster. But if an animal is really big and strong, it stands a chance of survival even in an icy trap. This story took place in Sweden. Even during the frostiest of winters, locals like to spend time outside. One couple not far from Ornskoldsvik had just finished their meal when they noticed something strange drifting in an almost frozen lake. They looked in their binoculars and the shock they felt was beyond imagination. They saw a moose in the ice and it was still alive. The temperature was so low that the water was frozen almost throughout its depths. But the lake was deep and probably the moose was too heavy, so the ice simply broke under it while it was walking across the the lake towards the other side. The couple could not leave the poor thing to die. Luckily, they had skates and ice axes with them. They skated towards the moose, but the animal was frightened and didn't let them get closer for a while. The ice continued to bind the animal, covering its skin and weakening it with cold. The moose surrendered and put its head on the ice. By that time, its whole body, except for its neck and head, was under the ice. That's when Victor Johansson took his ice axe and started to free the moose. He had mere minutes to do it. Besides, although the ice was rather thick, it was very dangerous near the edge where the animal broke it. It could break further any moment right under the man, but he continued to work. Eventually, after half an hour, the animal was able to get out and to the lakeshore and went off into the woods. Do you think it realized it had been saved and felt some kind of gratitude towards these people? And our next heroes definitely knew that people would help them. But how did they know? We're talking about ordinary wild geese. Yes, this story evokes questions, but it's fascinating nonetheless. Not far from the Chinese town of Qingdao, experts of the Forest and Wild Nature Protection Department were making a routine check of the territory. It was slightly frosty, it was a quiet day, and all of a sudden, a wild goose came running up to the people. He was yelling and flapping his wings as if inviting them to follow him. The ecologists did, and they were astonished as the bird led them to a frozen pond. There were the goose's relatives, 2 more birds. Their legs were stuck frozen in ice. The water was just beginning to freeze. Probably the geese had been swimming and didn't notice when the water suddenly turned into a trap. That's when one of them managed to get out and bring help. The scientists really did save the 2 geese successfully, though they needed an inflatable boat to do so. The ice was too thin for them to walk, but they acted quickly and the birds survived. Do you think an ordinary goose could have known that people would give a helping hand? Unfortunately, not all such stories have a happy ending for the animals involved. A warm-blooded beast loses its chances for revival after it has been fully frozen. However, ice can preserve their bodies in perfect condition for a long time. And sometimes an animal looking as if it just came from a taxidermist can be found in large chunks of ice. In January of 2017, some hunters were walking in a forest with a big lake in Germany. They were absolutely astounded when they found a big block of almost transparent ice containing a wholly preserved fox. The fox must have fallen in water while walking on ice floes, or maybe an unexpected wave has washed it off. Of course, we feel very sorry for the animal, but there's an interesting detail about this story. The thing is, the fox was immersed in ice so quickly that it instantly bound the beast. Usually, bodies of the animals found in ice look like mummies, thin with unnatural poses and only partially preserved fur, but not in this case. The fox remained practically intact. It even looks like it's still continuing its run. This makes it even more sad, don't you think? Of course, speaking about the finds in ice, we cannot omit mentioning Antarctica. It's a whole continent buried in snow and ice, a real kingdom of everlasting winter. Not a long time ago, scientists found petrified remains of the biggest penguin in history there. This prehistoric bird was 6 feet 8 inches, or about 2 meters in height. It's about 1.5 times taller than the biggest and tallest modern penguins. How do you like this bird as tall as an NBA player? It was named Colossus for that. Experts believe that such a size allowed it to hunt for larger and more nutritious fish. However, the stoned remains is all we have, so we can only guess what this penguin looked like. Do you think it resembled the modern birds, sweet and clumsy, or was it more like a polar ostrich? And what if we tell you that recently, scientists have discovered organisms that can only survive in snow and ice? They're not animals, but microscopic plants. No, trees don't grow on ice, but certain algae can live there. They dwell on the slopes of the Himalayan mountains in the highest regions of the planet and also in Antarctica at the North Pole. Yes, the algae is tiny and it might seem that they don't deserve any attention, but under favorable conditions, probably when there's lots of clean ice, they can grow into gigantic colonies which may cover many hectares of the icy desert. But the most interesting part is, these algae absorb the UV rays, which are more intense in the higher layers of the atmosphere. And because of this, they color the snow in bright red. It must be amazing to be walking across the clean white desert in the mountains and suddenly discover a blood red patch the size of a football field, and no other signs of life for miles around. Eerie, isn't it? What would you think if you were that mountain climber? By the way, the first time such snow was discovered was in the 19th century, but the scientists then thought it was a chemical reaction with the meteorite iron scurf. But now we know what it is. And we have more material to study as the amount of the red snow has increased in recent years. What do you think could be the reason for that? Maybe the ozone layer gets thinner due to global warming and the amount of the UV radiation increases. But now, prepare for a real shock, because sometimes ice can tell real stories from the past, and very tragic ones. A herd of horses was found in the ice of one of Canada's longtime frozen lakes. But how did they get there? Most probably, these are the horses that escaped a local farm during a fire in 1926. Running from the flames, a dozen horses headed towards the forest in a panic. They didn't notice a half-frozen lake on their way and got into it. They fought, but the cold took them over. Only their heads stuck out of the water, which turned into ice, which were perfectly preserved by the cold and a layer of ice. The horses were found several days after. Nowadays, this find has turned into a spooky landmark. Some guests even make picnics among the horse heads while enjoying the close-up view of the bodies that have remained under the ice for all these decades. Sometimes they even use the heads as chairs. What feelings does such a sight stir in you? Do you think something should be done about it? Please answer in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.